Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week brings a very special podcast. I was just at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, and while there, I had the chance to sit down in person with the Three Worlds, Three Moons team of Mike Del Mundo, Jonathan Hickman, and Mike Huddleston to discuss the concept universe they're building on Substack. This conversation was recorded for the podcast thanks to my pal David Kelly, and it's a great chat about what they're building over there. I hope you dig it. Let's get to it. I want to start with foundations. I mean, I got this book. It rules. You all did a really good job. Sasha did a good job. My wife and I had to figure out whether or not this was embossed or debossed. Turns out it's debossed.
Yeah. But
I really liked what you wrote in the back of the book where you said, what you hold in your hands is an idea made real, which is really cool. I mean, it's like I don't know a lot of people who've done this type of thing before, but I guess we'll start with the beginning. How's the first year been? We'll start with Mike.
It's been really exciting, but also I think there's a little bit of feeling adrift throughout the whole process because all of the metrics that you usually have to tell if a comic is successful or not, we don't have. We don't have sales numbers. We don't have any of the normal things. So a lot of time when people talk to us about how's it doing, we're like, we don't really know.
Yeah. Sure. And we started off, we didn't even have comics.
Right.
Well, that's true. Well, when we first started off, we didn't have anything. It was
because you're all on a run basically right at the start, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were all still working on other things. And the timeline was really Substack's timeline, not ours. It was just, we're starting a company. You guys are a comic company now. And we're announcing it, immediately. And we didn't have really anything.
And you weren't done with Decorum yet.
No, I stopped working on the last issue of Decorum to do the first comic for this.
The first little 6-page thing. And then you were still doing Spawn and
all sorts. I think I was doing a book for Scotty, too. So.
That's right. You had that. That's right. You had that issue of that, too. And so the first month outside of some drawings by you and some... the short story by you.
5-pager or whatever it was.
Basically, I was just riffing, because I was doing floor plans and stuff like that. And we were like, just let's get through this first month because we hadn't planned on schedules needing to be cleared up. We didn't know we were going to go in August.
Right.
We thought we would have a little bit more time, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you guys had a whole thing about this before I came on.
Right.
When I came on, it was literally 3 weeks before it was going to be announced. It was literally just are you interested? Yes. Okay, it's happening immediately, and we need comics drawn immediately. And the first few months, we didn't have Steve either.
Right.
So Mike and I were also doubling as editors. We were trying to find talent, trying to get them contracts. It was a mess. We didn't really have any. We didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, we also didn't want to be the dickheads asking for pages.
Being the muscle.
Right.
Where the hell are those pages?
Why you late, man?
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
I talked to Scotty about that, and he was telling me that was one of the toughest things for him to get used to with the Substack stuff was having to be the boss, having to be hey, Brett, I think is the name of Brett Bean is the artist for I Hate Fairyland. It's where are your pages, man? You have to be that person who's reminding people, I need pages for transit. I need some space whales. Where are my space whales at, Christian? And that's something you probably have to transition to.
But I think the first year has been really fun. It's been really fulfilling, working with these guys at this level of freedom and this level of input and making a universe. So all the creative side has been one of the best experiences I've ever had. And we're slowly figuring out all the business side, and it seems to be we have enough leeway that we can keep going. So I've loved it. I've loved this first year.
Yeah. What about you two? You're out on it, Mike?
Man, I think Mike answered a lot of it, but...
I'm sorry.
No. It's been great. It's just I think it's just gotten better and better each month. Like Mike said, we didn't have an editor. We were just doing everything ourselves. But everything's brand new. This is the first time I guess me and Mike have actually been concept designers.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing this whole thing. So that's a learning curve, and that's super fun. So, yeah, it's been great. I'm just excited for next year, man. We actually start doing books.
I do think it's really interesting because I mean, whatever you're working on, like with Decorum, like you're trying to turn around as fast as you can. Like, you know, you're writing something, you're trying to make sure you're in by deadlines. Like you got a cover due, you got to get that done. And like this, it's like you were talking about kind of floating a little bit. I do think it's interesting because like the collaborative process seems like it would probably change because you are kind of making your own schedule and you're kind of deciding what's coming next. Is it going to be comics? Is it going to be like the system stuff from like Teeny and Al and from Rom and everything? And I don't know. I'm interested in how different that part felt. Like, did it feel like you could do a lot of new and interesting things because you didn't have kind of like that, I don't know, guillotine of the deadline coming? This is just like you can design. Like, here's a good example. So like Tajo, like I love that Swish gauntlet you did, and I love like the like space race, like kind of 60s, 50s type look to that. Mm-hmm. And you probably wouldn't be able to put those like mood boards together and stuff like that to really costume these characters on a normal deadline rate. And I don't know, does it really feel like it's a lot freer for the process of developing all this stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, doing designs for Marvel, I was drawing the designs while I was doing the pages. I was drawing them right into the page. This way it's different. We're literally like really breaking it down, having our mood boards, seeing and doing like 15 iterations of that character.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely different in that vein.
You like it better?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a luxury. It's not.
Well, I mean, that's part of the exercise, though, right? Like, it's. I think the thing that we did in our first year that was smart was that we told people we're doing this from 0 point, you know, and it's going to be messy, and you're going to see a bunch of process, and some of you may check out, some of you may not like it, and because it's not stories, it's not comics yet,
right.
We're not there yet, and it will take us a little bit of time, development time, to get it to where we're giving you what you normally eat, you know? And I think the strength of what we did is that we embraced that and that we made it about that and we made it a process thing. And, you know, it's been, for me, it hasn't been different at all. Like I'm just writing stuff and creating stuff and all that kind of thing. But I think for you guys, it's been like almost re-education in that you're the boss. You can do whatever you want to do. There's no like rules here. If the writer tells you something to draw and you don't like it, you just ignore that ass. You know, you make it better. You know, I think it took you guys like 3 or 4 months to where you were like super comfortable being like, you know what, I'm just gonna cut loose.
Yeah, I mean, there's still times that I feel like Steve is my boss. So
because you're used to that.
Well, yeah, I mean. You're a freelancer in comics, and he's an editor.
Right.
You know, de facto, he tells you what to do. So that's a different experience. I think the only thing that weighs on the other side of how much freedom we have and what we've been able to do this first year is that the audience is still trained on where's my monthly book,
right.
and we have heard from a couple
sure,
people
and I think
in our community online that's like they just want books. So there are people who are really excited about the process and stuff.
Which is
we don't
totally
have forever.
Yeah, but that's a totally legitimate argument.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's just not valid because we were very open and honest up front about what we were doing. And we can always say, you know, this is a process thing. This is where we are in the process. We have a ton of stuff coming out next year.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
But I think for me, like, internalizing that pressure was never just completely off the board. Like I knew there were people out there that are looking at their watch wanting stuff, which is a great problem to have.
Sure,
you know, but
sure.
So yeah, it was.
I think as long as we're honest about what we're doing and what people are getting,
yeah,
then we're fine. As an expert in late books from time to time, I will say that if you wow them in the end,
Yeah.
you're okay. You're okay. And we know what we're producing. We'll be fine.
I mean, I do think that's the interesting part about like the idea that we're now in year 2 for 3 Worlds, 3 Moons. And I don't want to make it seem like the first year wasn't like important because that's where all the like work was done. Like you were literally building the foundations of this. But it is kind of interesting because I imagine it feels pretty exciting to get into that second year because now you got to start showing the comics. Now you got to start seeing like the work that's kind of everything that the work has been going to.
Well, yes, absolutely. And what's interesting is, does it screw up the process? Does it break the mechanism? Like normally people are used to getting a book and they get the book and they make their determination on based entirely on what's in the book.
Right.
There's not 1,000 pages of stuff that was pre-done that they saw and all of that kind of stuff, and that we may have spoiled some things and all that. It'll be interesting to see if this breaks the narrative or if it enhances the narrative, right? Which is, again, part of what we do is we're experimenting, and we'll see how it goes. It'll either make it way richer, it will ruin the experience, or it'll have no effect at all.
Yeah.
And we're okay with all three of those. We would like it not to ruin the experience.
Right.
But we're okay because we're trying it, you know?
Trying something new.
We had a little juggling of that right at the beginning when we were like, when we're showing process stuff, and then it was like, do we show process stuff before the story? Is this spoiling stuff? Is it better to show, just figuring out even how are we unrolling, the process stuff with the stories that we're releasing? We were already like, are we enhancing? Are we breaking? Like, how do we like unroll all this stuff? Because
Yeah, there was a
No
big
one's done
argument.
it.
There was a big argument. Do you show concept sketches before you drop the 6-page stories or 5-page stories or
Right.
whatever? I mean, like we had a big, conversation about it. I don't even know where we landed. Where did we land?
we do it after now.
Right.
But I think part of why we had to do it that way at the begining is we just literally had process images before the comics were done. So it was like we either show this or we show nothing.
Yeah. Well, because you had to like a post at like I think it was like 100 posts in the first year, like 2 a week or something like that. So there was always like,
Yeah, I mean, we were never going to fall short of that, but it was one of those things where it was. But I was always okay with, well, maybe we just post next week,
Right.
and obviously Substack did not, agree with that.
I think you told me once that you would prefer it if comics never had previews.
Oh, I hate them.
Yeah.
I hate them. I think they're wrong. I think they're the comics experience. I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but for me, reading comic books was going to the store, looking on the spinner rack, seeing a cool cover, wanting to pick up that book and reading it, not knowing anything about it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think everything that I do is about trying to recreate and recapture that. And I fought with Marvel for years about it. But I mean, I think I'm right. I win a lot, in that argument.
It's just interesting in the context of this because it's like what you're talking about, where it's like, do you roll out these process things where you're seeing like what these characters look like and the thought that goes into it? Because that's a narrative in its own right in some ways, like what you're dressing these characters as, or like the hospital rooms you have to draw over and over. I don't know if you've been subjected to that recently. I know you had to do that for a while.
No, I haven't done a hospital room recently.
Okay, good. But I mean, it is interesting because like that's kind of like, I don't know, it can feel like cart before the horse where you get that process first. But I do like that stuff. I like that it really enriches it. And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. I did want to ask about like how you approached developing during the first year, because it's interesting. Like I look at it and I know it's going somewhere and I love all the details to it, but I never know what's kind of guiding you. Is what's guiding you, what stories you want to tell, like what worlds you want to see? Is it just about building those foundations? Like what was kind of driving the things you were making in that first year?
Well, the script.
That's a good one.
We get the script first, and then from there, we're building a new world. So there's no rules. We're just going at it. So from the script, we just start drawing, and you realize when you're doing concept work, it starts off as a small drawing, and then it becomes a story. And we're like, oh, Jonathan, I think we could do this with this story. I think we could do this with that story. We start trying to, we're starting to think we're writers here, whatever. But it becomes that way. Like it's like, I think every character or every scene that we've drawn, we just like organically start getting ideas for what this world could be.
Yeah.
Like how it works, the mechanics of it all. So,
Yeah.
And I think it's been interesting. At the very beginning, it was more just completely wide open. Like when we do the first couple stories, we would talk a little bit. But now we're starting to get slight continuity where a story will take place on a planet that we visited before. And now we're like, oh, okay, this architecture and these soldiers and whatever we already have stuff established in this world. So now we're starting to have things that fit in with stuff that we've already designed before. Whereas the first few stories, there was nothing. We could just shoot off in any direction possible. So it's like that quilt is slowly being like pieced together.
Yeah.
And there's times that Mike and I even like a script will come in and we're like, have we designed this? Have we been on this place before? Or are we in the right era? Like, have we been in this era on this planet before? So we're having to, we need someone to just organize all the stuff almost for us. So when we know we're designing something new, we can see all the pre-designed stuff for it. So it's weird how it's all of our work, but we're getting a little more confined just because we've already defined a lot of stuff.
Well, I know, and you went back to some places too. So you're you have your own continuity. I know that's a very superhero word, but it's just it's true. It's like you have to. I mean, I thought a smart idea with the Valors is the fact that you have, like I mentioned, the costuming that you all are doing. It makes sense that it would have to look older because this is a younger version of this character. So it's like, what do? You use your own history for that. You look back and have the Jetsons style look, the Hanna-Barbera look from there.
I couldn't think of really what else to do. And a lot of the thing that I like is that when we're designing these short stories, they're pretty quick. They're usually pretty quick turnarounds. So Mike and I are really riffing. And once all his designs and my designs sit next to each other, it starts making its own thing. So trying to define different eras in the sci-fi universe, I don't even know exactly what it's going to be until we just turn all of our stuff in, and then you see it next to each other, and you're like, okay, we've established some of these vibes entirely on accident. Yeah, some of those things it's hard to do because I don't know any way to do it other than to make an analog from our world so that readers understand what they're looking at. But it is a strange task sometimes.
I do think if you go too hard in that direction, if you try to make something that looks super retro or something like that, it's just going to feel weird. There's going to be a dissonance there.
You could break it. You could pull people out of the story by being too referential. So.
I do think it's interesting. So I think it was one of your two write-ups for the Valor's process stuff where you were talking about how you split it, where it's half the characters went to you and half the characters went to you. And I do think it's interesting because obviously, one of my favorite things, I'm going to transition really quick. I love the fact that instead of saying written by Jonathan Hickman, drawn by, Mike and Mike, you have story and concept 3W3M. And I think that's important because it's, maybe you're not writers, but you're all storytellers. And is that part of the reason why you wanted it to be 3W3M instead of the neatly delineated roles that we're used to in comics?
Well, I mean, I think that having been on the receiving end of getting all the praise and all the blame and all of that kind of stuff, being me in the Marvel ecosystem, right? I find it offensive. I've always found it offensive.
The onus being on you entirely?
Well, of course, because this is a collaborative medium, and I like working with people who push back and push me forward, right? And I've always had a really good relationship with the vast majority of artists that I've worked with, but when I did stuff like East of West or whatever, and it really became, the synthesis of me and Nick Dragata, it really got to the point where it was not cool and not fair to my co-creator that everybody gave me all this credit for making everything up. Some of that is because of the kind of writer that I am, I'm sure. I'm a world builder. That kind of stuff is nonsense. But in terms of this, we have zero interest in saying I did this part and Mike did this part and you credit it properly. We made a company, and we are a collective. The argument, before Mike came on, and the reason why Mike Huddleston came on late was because we were going to do this as a Kickstarter, right when the pandemic started, and it was going to be me and Del Mundo and some other guys. But the point of it was we wanted to do like the traveling Wilburys of comics, where it was like literally just riffing and 5 killer artists. Doesn't matter if you're an artist or a writer or whatever, like we're artists and we're making stuff, right? Jamming. That's just it's a jam album. And obviously we did not do that for lots of reasons. And so when the Substack stuff, was put in front of me, the initial offer was, Jonathan, we want to give you some money. And I was like, I'm not interested in that. I want to do the other thing. And so we started talking about this, and then we thought about we need, another decent artist. And Decorum was almost over.
Right.
I mean, that was the big reason why Mike was available was because we had used that time we had finished Decorum, which was a really long 2-year project, right?
Yeah.
But, we're doing this together. We should be credited together. It's not, I do some design stuff. I do some aesthetic stuff. I have very strong opinions about how things should look, But these guys are coming up with story concepts. These guys are feeding back into the machine. And I think it's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any other way to say it beyond it feels fair.
Yeah.
And we're equal partners. Like it's not any unyoked kind of situation. And, I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but I felt like it took you guys a little while to be bosses. Our vote is equal to your vote,
I still don't know if I've entirely wrapped my head around that, but
I think being an artist, you get wired into not being the boss.
Programmed is the word.
That's really
you've been programmed into being.
It's really hard to rewire yourself.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of
institutionalized.
You're kind of used to from the outside, it's like you could easily think that the typical comics process is like an assembly line. And that's obviously not a totally fair way to look at it. But at the same time, like that's what I really appreciate about this is like, I look at your work, Mike Del Mundo, and I look at your like print. Like you have a print up at the booth of like Galactus eating a planet like an apple, and it's interesting because while you've done interiors, I don't think that like you've ever been able to like tap into the creativity you have. This is not me disparaging of your other work, but this feels like you being really unleashed in a really real way. Yep. You're cool too, but but I mean it's really cool being able to see that. And I don't know.
The storytelling stuff that Mike does on his covers is unprecedented,
right?
In like that whole little realm, and
it's very upsetting.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's
here's the thing about it. It's a better story than a lot of the stories that are inside the comics that he's put covers on, which we can use that.
Right.
And Huddleston has an entirely different, insane narrative set where he drills down to the microscopic level and everything is a question.
Mm-hmm.
Should it be this way? Should it be that way? Down to the, it's like falling down a well for you, right? Whenever you're designing and coming up with something. I mean, you exhaust the thing to the point where it's, okay, now I'm tired. I have to move on to this next design.
Right. I mean, I don't do that purposefully, but yeah, it's...
well, I mean, you're a crazy person, but like in a way that we can use this,
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well,
we're all crazy.
I know this is not
come on.
your different question you're asking, but like that's part of the thing that's great. Like when Mike and I are splitting, because it's pretty normal for us to split the chores on any script that we get, and we have to think about what's going to hang together and what's really great if it's different. But just sometimes designing stuff with him and seeing how different the approaches are, and him turning in stuff I would never come up with in a million years, but seeing how brilliant that approach is, it's been really educational for me. Like I'm hoping to not always have to be a crazy person to design something, and it's really interesting to like watch the way you design stuff. It's set off some light bulbs for me.
Thanks. I mean, I think that's what's great of having two artists, because you'll never come up with what the other artists will come up with. So I'll see what Mike does and I'll take it.
Especially you two guys. Like you guys never come up with the same stylistic or functional like kind of thing. I also want to add, it's very important that to me personally, that I can be outvoted.
You can't go power mad because they can outvote you.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit of a monster, I suppose, but I mean,
You have very strong opinions about very specific things.
Well, right. And the thing about it is that I think the way that I say it, sometimes people are too deferential, like it's the gospel or something like that, when really I'm just expressing an opinion, you know? So there you go.
The last thing I'll say about the Three Worlds stuff, about the crediting, is that Jonathan is really generous with all this. Like, his attitude is not universal amongst writers in this business. So him feeling the way he does and wanting to share this much credit and put himself, on a parallel level with us, he's really being generous. It's like he doesn't have to handle this way. So it's something I'm thankful for. It's one of the reasons I really like
and I don't
him.
feel that way at all, but I appreciate that.
You could be a huge jerk if you wanted to be.
I don't think people would want to work with you if you were a huge jerk. I don't think that you'll get the best out of everybody.
Well, no, you won't.
If you're a huge jerk. And, at the end of the day, spiritually, I'm an art guy before I'm a story guy. And it makes me sad having to watch these two geniuses just dunk all over everything.
I do love, talking about like the unleashing like the shackles of like kind of how everything works and everything like that, and like how you had to get used to it over like 3 or 4 months of being the boss and everything. I do think it's really interesting, like from a design standpoint too. Did you feel like, and we'll start with you, Mike, do you feel like it took a bit to realize you can kind of unleash in a way you're not used to artistically, or did you feel like from the start you were just designing because it's the best?
I always took the same approach as when I worked, for Marvel.
Right.
Whereas I'm just gonna do it like whatever I want to do, because it usually works out that way.
Right.
So
It's true.
I'm serious. It's like so with this stuff, it was almost like even freer because no one was really telling us what to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you work at other companies, like, they'll give their suggestions, and then it kind of messes your brain up, like, oh man, I don't want that image in my head because now I'm like going to be drawing like that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm always like, no, I'm not. I've always been that person to be like, no, I'm going to try this first. If you guys don't like it, maybe we'll go your way, but I'm going to always try this first. When we started doing 3 Worlds, 3 Moons, it was none of these guys were like, Mike, we want you to do this and this and this.
Right. Just be you.
Yeah, just be you. Yeah.
It was weird too because you and I have never worked together.
No, it's crazy.
So it was
It's a big swing for your first partnership.
Well, so it's kind of like, fingers crossed. I did. Do you remember? Do you remember me calling you that time? And I was like, listen, Mike, I don't know whether you're happy or not. Are you happy?
Well,
It's a big question.
We should talk about that because when you called me and you asked me that, I was like, I remember talking to Erica and being like, I don't understand I think Jonathan doesn't know if I'm having fun or not. And I'm trying my best to tell him that this is like the best shit in the world.
Oh, you mean for 3 Worlds?
Yeah.
I
I
really
just
wanted to let him know that this is a dream,
Yeah.
to be honest. And I felt like I couldn't communicate that properly because, he hit me up. He's just like, "Are you happy?" I'm just like, "I'm fucking happy, man." Like, I don't know how else. Like
I don't mean to be existential, but are you happy in
Well,
life?
so we have like Zoom meetings where we talk about everything, and Del Mundo has his camera higher than everybody else, so it's looking down on him.
Yeah, because so you don't see my double chin.
But it's like
that's the only reason why.
But it is.
It's a MySpace angle.
It's like an aerial shot.
It
of the
is.
room.
It's higher. It's higher on his head, and it's also further back, and so he's smaller in the screen, and he just kind of sits there and does this pose, like through a lot of like. And one day I was just like, I don't know if Mike's having a good time or not. I probably should check and see if he's like actually enjoying this.
Well, the best part of actually doing these conventions, so we started doing San Diego, Chicago, and now we're doing this, was the bonding. Because like Zoom is like totally so hard.
It sucks.
San Diego was the first time you and I met, for real.
I met even Jonathan, first time meeting everybody.
You did. You were like, should we hug? And then and you could tell, you could see it in your eyes. You were like, should I hug this man? And you were like, I'm just going for it. I'm gonna hug this guy.
You felt that?
I did.
But it was awesome because then I was like, now I can really tell everybody how good I feel about this.
Now they don't have to ask you if you're happy anymore.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is how it used to work.
Yeah.
You know, like you didn't used to not see people for 2 years and
Right.
shit like that. So I mean, and that's another thing that's kind of weird is that this was born during that period of time, and it's just it almost feels like first 1 year of chaos, and now everything is kind of normalized, and we're kind of, talking to publishers and talking about deals and like normal stuff,
Right.
So
Well, the year of development that we would have had to have had anyway, we've had now. We just had it on stage in front of everybody.
Right.
so
No pressure.
Yeah.
but it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
you know?
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. It's Bad Idea, and Bad Idea is back. What are they doing? I have no idea. I think they have some comics coming out. If you get the latest Previews magazine, I think there's a comic from Mark Waid and David Lapham in it. It's really weird. It's Bad Idea 2, the sequel. I don't know if it's an Electric Boogaloo, but they're making comics again. No more donuts. And now, back to the show. Well, last question I want to ask is, I actually think that part is really interesting because most of the time we don't see all of this stuff. We're not part of this process. And you talk about how the subscribers and the people who backed Three Worlds, Three Moons are kind of part of the process and foundations. Like, how does it change things knowing that you're not just making this comic, but you're also like managing a community and trying to engage with people, but also trying to like make sure that they're happy with everything? I mean, I know a lot of that. The good news is you have Steve now, so you're just like, Steve, take care of this. But I mean, does that change things, making the, because it's like, it's not just a concept universe, it's not just jam, but it's also like live art in a lot of ways. We're seeing it all being made in front of our eyes, and that really, I've never felt anything like it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean,
I think the feeling that I generally have is there's more things for me to be anxious about because it's not just
you really feel it. Like, you really feel when somebody says it's something negative or somebody says something.
When it's immediate. I mean, the immediacy is great on the side of like when we get concepts done or we get a story in, it's up that day. We don't have the 4-month process, but the other side of it is if someone's unhappy or they don't like something, you hear about that immediately too. Normally, you're just trying to juggle like, does this drawing suck? Does my storytelling make sense? Just the basic artist jobs. But now you do have these vague senses of like, are we managing our community okay? Do we have enough posts that people feel engaged, or are we overwhelming people with engagement? And there's a whole set of concerns I've never really had to think about before, and I don't really know exactly how to handle most of them. So I have a sense that altogether we're kind of managing it, but for me, I think I'm just worried about more things than I normally am.
Do you feel that at all, Mike?
Are you happy?
Yeah. I mean,
But not like him, though, right?
Well, I'm not like
I'm not saying you're weak
I'm
or
not
anything
up at
like
night
that.
freaking out, but I'm like, there's just more. I think it's part of the.
But you are up at night.
Well, it's part of the boss. Well, yeah, but I think it's part of the boss part. I'm like, I actually have more concerns on my plate now than just did my drawing land.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, Steve really does help a lot. But in terms of like...
Yeah, you guys don't even worry about it anymore now that Steve's on,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But it is, I mean, with the comments and stuff, if you do something for Marvel, right, or any other book, you can turn those comments off on Twitter.
Right.
You don't want to go on there, right? But because this is a community and, we want it to be a community, we have to be involved, like listening to, those comments as well.
I think so. I think everybody's here for the show, which means they're here to see what art that we do. And so therefore we have to be beholden to that before anything else.
Yeah.
Because we've been selling comics for years, and this is just kind of a different channel of that. I do think that there is a, like when we do like the movies or something like that, like things like that are kind of fun, and they're fun in a way that's community building that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're doing except kind of, hey, we like this stuff and let's talk about it. I think that stuff is always useful because you might get a germ of something out of it. I think and this is just like a lot of comments over a lot of years at this point. I think that a lot of the behavior from people is entirely predictable, in that there's just a way that they're going to respond. You know, like when a first issue comes out, it's not what they were expecting. And so they're going to reject the first issue until the second issue comes out and you reframe it in a way that's new and fresh, and then they're delighted and surprised. And then in the third issue, you pull the rug out from under them because what they thought that they had figured out is actually not real at all. And then on the fourth issue, like they're having emotional reactions to that, even when it's just a concept sketch. They have an emotional reaction to that you're actually controlling, right? As storytellers and as artists and creators, and you just can't get upset at them or even register it as a complaint or anything like that whenever they have a visceral reaction to something that you've created. And so I've gotten numb to it because, you know, I'd usually take big swings and people react very, you know, broadly to big swings. And so I think our community is fine. I think it will continue to grow. I think we're going to, when the books are more mainstream, then the audience will feel more mainstream instead of a small group of hyper people who are paying, you know, an insane amount of attention to every little nuance. You know, it's like John Byrne back in the day. You know, like every time John Byrne went on a book, the sales increased by 20,000. Or whatever that. What was it called? The
Byrne bump or something like that.
Something, yeah. Right? Yeah. And you know, there's a truth to that. Like whenever we do a cool book, there's going to be a response to it. And whenever we start a new project, there's going to be a certain amount of excitement because we've done well on other projects over the years. You know, we have the three of us have a pretty good track record of doing cool, quote, cool, uncool stuff. And so anytime we produce something and it doesn't feel as cool, or it feels a little different, or they don't get it, or whatever, there's going to be a reaction, and you just can't get upset about it because they're having an experience that's entirely your fault. And I'm not talking I'm not talking about the stuff about we did a bad job with whatever socio-political thing that you're drilling into the book, right? I'm not talking about that version of it. That's a different thing. I'm talking about the visceral reaction to someone telling you a story. And that's on us, but it's delightful and amazing and an incredible privilege. And so, you know, you just got to understand that the noise is noise. And it's okay to get booed. Like, it's okay for people to boo the shit out of you every time, especially when you have a bad person do a bad thing in a story. Like, I want you to be upset about it, you know? Or better than that, when a bad person does a bad thing, but it secretly delights the shit out of them, right? Right? Like, that's cool.
Right.
And so, you know, all of that is perfectly fine.
I love one thing in the comments. Mike, you seem like you get a lot of the comments sometimes where, like, really? There was like something that I forgot, it was for one of the Valor Process posts, and somebody came up with an acronym for one of the things you designed, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to use that. And it's just kind of interesting to see that type of live feedback, because, like, I don't know, like, everyone comes up with their ideas for this stuff. That's one of the cool things is like, you can take whatever you want out of these things, and something can be really important. Like when we talked on the podcast before, the two mics I'm pointing at, I was like really laying into transit because I think that's a really great short story. But I also love how there's like little details in there where it's like there's always 80 of the Vojaganto, the space whales, and they never decay, they never like die, they never birth. They're just always 80. And like my brain just like spirals when I read something like that. I was telling my wife about it the other day, and I was just like, this shit is crazy. I want to know, but you may never get to that. Or you may get to it. I don't know, but I'm part of the ride, and it's pretty cool just to be able to see you guys will things into existence.
Well, I mean, as far as the interactive elements of our storytelling, that's something that we're really, really excited about. You know, like having decisions by the readers have some weight. Like we're really excited about some of the stuff that we're getting ready to do, and so
is the path.
Yeah, I mean that's like the first example of it, but I mean we have some pretty aggressive ideas of what we're going to be doing in years 2 and 3 of ways that we can involve the audience in a way that they aren't involved at Marvel or DC or Image or whatever. Like, we want to do if we're putting the book out digitally, first, then we should take advantage of that. So
yeah,
that's partly the reason why we started off doing this as like a process thing, community involved, because there's definitely a lot of plans that we're going to do. By the time we get to do it, maybe they'll learn the language and get used to like this whole idea of what we did for the first year. So it's almost like a warm up.
Well, I'm excited to see the main act, but that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me for a chat at Emerald City Comic Con.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with the Three Worlds, Three Moons crew of Mike Del Mundo, Jonathan Hickman, and Mike Huddleston. You can find Three Worlds, Three Moons on Substack at 3w3m.substack.com. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman as well, who edited and produced this week's episode. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast today on Apple Podcasts and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uritem, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Beachy, Ben Damstead, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Norb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Brian, Submit Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Mike Cancel, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shavy, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Pula, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiamping, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Philip Myra, Christian Sheldon, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torrent Grubeck, Buzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mayazel, Akil Wilson, Alex Demetriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwand, Vita Ayala, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Jason Nassy, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Terra, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Paul McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.